Greetings again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of OSI Today, the podcast featuring news and views from around the Office of Special Investigations. I'm Wayne Amon from OSI Public Affairs, and in this edition, we continue our very special series, My OSI Journey, which showcases the diversity and inclusion of our command-wide members. And today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Colonel Ryan Hendricks, the Staff Judge Advocate for Headquarters OSI. Colonel Hendricks, welcome aboard to the program. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me aboard.
Now, I'd like to lead off, and I use that term specifically, sir, because for our listeners out there, you had a very interesting career choice originally. You were a professional baseball player for a few years. Now, could you kind of spin our listeners up on that and how you made the transition from the diamond to the courtroom?
Absolutely. Well, I am the son of a professional baseball player, Elrod Hendricks, and grew up in and around the game, growing in and around professional athletes my whole life. Actually, wasn't drawn to baseball immediately. Was always a sports draw, I guess, because of the background, if you
Right.
will. But the first love was football. Mom wanted no part of that. So,
I can
so
relate
I
to
did.
that, Colonel. My dad didn't want me
Yes.
to play football too, so
Yeah, there's probably many kids, right? Especially
yeah,
even today, it's now that we know more about the sport. But
sure.
so mom wanted no part of me playing football. So, but that, of course, with any child, drew them more to it, right? So
Hmm.
I was all about it, and I was a three-sport athlete in high school. Probably basketball was my favorite sport, or my best sport, actually.
Right.
But it wasn't until I was a teenager, because my dad had seen the effects of pushing a kid too hard in one direction, especially
Uh-huh.
the sons of athletes. So he
Sure.
didn't. He took a very hands-off approach, and I appreciate that. Love him for that. But it wasn't until I was a teenager that I decided that I wanted to play baseball, and it actually took a conversation between my mom and dad to go, okay, Ryan's made the choice, so you need to. You are a professional coach. You need to help him.
Right.
So from that point on, it was all in. Uh, it was tons of baseball. Love my mom for all the hours, and parents don't get enough credit for any of the athletes that we see today doing great things because they put in hours and money and
Sure.
time that just goes. I wouldn't say unappreciated or unnoticed, but by the masses, it definitely goes unnoticed. The
Right. Right.
travel and you know many parents or many kids have the benefit of two parents and much like military kids, professional athletes obviously are gone for at least half of the year,
Right.
uh, doing what it is that they do, putting putting food on the table for the family. So,
Uh-huh.
and baseball being the grind that it is, a 162 game season. So,
Right.
and 80 of those games are on the road. And that
Right.
doesn't include travel time or spring training. So you can do the math. You can figure out that, a lot of that time is gone. So a lot of time was on my mom. That that just was thrust from my mom's shoulders. But
Right.
all in on baseball
Right.
from that point in. Uh, Parents very much instilled in me that school was always a priority, that there had to be life after baseball,
Right.
and something.
Before we go into life after baseball, Colonel, I would like to bring up one important fact for our listeners that you were a pretty good baseball player in the day because you were drafted by your hometown Baltimore Orioles in the 38th round of the 1994 Major League Baseball amateur draft from St. Andrews University in Laurinburg, North Carolina. So I think before you went into the legal profession, you did make your mark in baseball.
No, and that's what I was saying. Mom and dad instilled in me very much so early on that it wasn't just going to be all baseball, that you had to know or you had to have something to fall back on.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
baseball wouldn't work out, maybe you'd get hurt, and I did.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
or anything. Or bottom line is most even Major League Baseball careers last less than 10 years, and then you
Sure.
have the rest of
Sure.
your life to figure out what it is that you want to do.
Right.
And so they stressed school. And so even when I came out of high school, although there was interest, I made it really clear to every scout that was talking to me that I was going to college. And
Right.
I again, thankful to my parents for instilling that in me. While it was my decision, there's a whole lot of influence from
Oh
mom
yeah.
and dad
Yeah.
in
No
that
doubt.
decision.
No doubt.
Um, and so I did. And I went my first 2 years. I actually went to George Washington University.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I transferred after my sophomore year. My coach, this dates me, and I feel like a dinosaur sometimes. But my but the head coach at George Washington left to become a scout with the Miami Marlins. I had to get
Uh-huh.
it right because that's what they were called back then.
Yeah,
It was
right.
their very first year being in existence.
Right, right.
And so it was an expansion club. He took its great opportunity. And so with that, I was able to get an outright release. I didn't have to sit out a year because I transferred schools. So I left.
Uh-huh.
And I went to St. Andrews, which you accurately stated. It was a total baseball move. Obviously, George Washington University is a magnificent academic institution,
Right. Right.
and that was the drive between the behind the initial choice. But because I actually proved, I guess, at that level, at the Division I level, that I was actually pretty good at baseball.
Uh-huh.
I went to North Carolina because, little known fact, the state of North Carolina has more scouts per capita than any other state in the union.
Ah, there. That's a fun fact. Okay. Yeah, very good.
Exactly. And so it was very much a baseball move. Wonderful coach there. It was an up and coming program at the time. They were NAIA and division going to Division II, well established and kind of a powerhouse actually.
Right.
Um, but very little known. Nobody knows where Laurinburg, North Carolina is. I didn't even know where it was. Actually, I
Right.
went there sight unseen.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I actually went there for the last 2 years, like you said. Graduated from there, got drafted, played 4 years with the Orioles. So fast forward during the time where I'm playing with the Orioles. Obviously, my dad's still a coach with the Orioles as well,
Right.
and Peter Angelos, who is the primary, the lead owner of the Orioles. They're owned by a conglomerate, a collection of people. However,
Right.
he is the primary owner of the team, and he is a very prominent lawyer who made his money in asbestos litigation.
Uh-huh.
He has a huge law firm in Baltimore City. Uh, and what he would do is with we would say highfalutin clients, he would bring them down to the team
Uh-huh.
and show off, this thing that he owned.
Sure. Sure.
So
Sure.
why not? Why not? It's like the Air Force does the same thing. We bring in high-powered people and we show off our toys. Be it jets or weapon systems, we show them off when we have
Right.
visitors.
Right.
So he would do the same thing, but he had a liaison between the law firm and the ball club, and that liaison became a good life friend of mine, and his name was David Boljano.
Uh-huh.
He was a Jag before.
Okay.
He was actually a Baltimore City cop, then
Right.
Baltimore City cop, then he went to law school, then he became a Jag in the Army. He was
Huh.
82nd Airborne,
Right.
and then he left, got his law degree.
Wow.
Excuse me. Then he left, got a civilian job, and actually worked his way up to become an associate with Mr. Angelos.
Right.
So he was the person who would bring these clients by, and while they're jaw dropped and oohing and ahhing, he would just stand around at the back, and we'd have many conversations. My dad put
Uh-huh.
me in contact with him,
Right.
and we became very good friends. And so I was interested in law. Like I said, there's always had to be something after baseball.
Right.
And so he would talk to me and about law, period, and becoming a lawyer. But then he said, if you ever do it, if you're really serious about this, please keep in mind the JAG Corps. It's a
Yeah.
worthwhile endeavor. It's time of my life. Although he left at 12 years. He goes, I don't regret a single day, and
Right.
I miss it quite often. And
Mm.
so, and he stayed in the reserves. That was the thing. So he
Okay.
was still connected to the military.
Right. Right.
Um, so I go to law school, and ironically, I went to the University of Baltimore
Okay.
because, like I told you, I did get hurt in the third year of my career. Came back, played the fourth year. I ruptured a disc in my back,
Uh,
um, and so then I could actually, because when you're a kid and you're playing baseball, when you're an athlete, you think you're bulletproof until,
right.
until
Right.
life proves to you that you're not. And that was the moment that I realized I'm not bulletproof.
Now
And
this
so
was now, Colonel, this was in the Orioles minor league system, correct?
that is. I was
Okay.
playing in
Okay.
California League.
Yeah.
I remember exactly where I was and what happened, but yeah, popped and had emergency surgery. They flew me back. I played for 4 months with it ruptured without
Wow.
knowing it was ruptured.
Uh-huh.
We got an MRI, and it was immediate because it was that bad. They were like, "You
Sure.
don't know
Sure.
how you're not paralyzed, but you could be.
Right.
So
Right.
we need to get you on a table really fast." So they flew me
Wow.
back. I had surgery. At Hopkins, and the rest is, as they say, is history. It was great,
Sure.
great
Sure.
doctors, and very thankful for that.
Right.
But um, especially after that year, I became very serious about what am I going to do next. And
Right.
so I would talk with Mr. Boljano, and he actually taught a course. Or actually, like I said, I went to Mr. Angelos, met him in his office, and said,
Mhm.
I want to go to law school. And
Right.
he grilled me for
Right.
about 15 minutes as to why. And he made a call. Um, and I think I was actually intent on going to University of Maryland, but
Uh-huh.
he's actually the benefactor for uh, University of Baltimore, which is where I went to law school. And
Right.
he made a
Right.
couple calls. I'd applied to both, but got into both, but that one was a lot easier and a lot faster. So
Yeah.
I started law school right away. Third year law school, Dave Bogiano was actually teaching a course on military law at
Uh-huh.
University of Baltimore because that's also his alma mater.
Right.
And of course, I took it because I was like, the professor, that can't be a bad thing.
There you go.
Um, so we spent that whole semester really talking it through, um, what I was going to do. And the funny thing is, he said, "Well, Rye, if you've listened to me at all, and I doubt that you have, I know I've been a pest to you about joining the JAG Corps, but if you do it, you have to hear me on this one thing. If you're going to join, if you're going to join, go Air Force." And I was
There
like,
you,
"But you were an
okay.
Army JAG. You were 82nd Airborne. That sounds cool
Yeah.
as cool as all get out." He was like, "Yeah, there's a little thing called quality of life. You don't know what that means.
There you go. Yeah.
You have no
Yeah.
idea what that
That
term means right now."
that has always been a staple for the United States Air Force, no doubt
It
about that.
has. It has, and he was right, and I do know what it meant. I learned quickly what it meant and the difference between. He was like, "You don't know what it means, but you got to trust me on this one," because he had switched to the Air Reserve at that
Right.
point.
Right.
uh, and so I joined,
Very
and
good.
actually, I was already accepted to the Army JAG Corps. I had to put in a quick application to the Air
Yeah.
Force JAG Corps, but the rest, as they say, is history. It's
Yeah.
because of my career path, obviously, because 2 years at GW and 2 years at St. Andrews, 4 years of college, and then
Uh-huh.
playing for 4 years of baseball and doing 3 years of law school. The reality was the 4 year commitment. I was like, I can do anything for 4 years, even if it's terrible,
Right.
even
Right.
if it's the worst thing ever. And
Mhm.
I went into it saying, I'll do this as long as it's fun, and if not, I'll move on and do the next thing. Because actually, the quick segue at one part that I did leave out is I actually practiced for the better part of a year when I was in law school. I
Uh-huh.
worked with a man called Harold Glazer.
Yeah.
Taught me pretty much how to be a lawyer, how to walk, talk. I was more his apprentice than
Uh-huh.
anything else. And at the about the 10-month mark, he offered me a partnership in his law firm. I had my application and excuse me, my acceptance into the JAG Corps, and I told him
Right.
this was the direction I was going to go.
Uh-huh.
And honestly, that was waiting for me probably for the first 10 years of my career. He called me
Wow.
every year, be like, "You sure you want to keep doing this? Because you have a job." And it
Sure.
was, like I said, I was going to do it just like my dad said with baseball. I'll do it till it's not fun anymore.
Exactly. Now, fast forward a few years. Obviously, you've done, according to your biography, you've done quite a few things since you made the transition to the legal profession. Within the Air Force. And again, for the benefit of our listeners, you're fairly new to OSI. As we do this interview, you've only been, the staff judge advocate for OSI for the last few months. And so, given that perspective, uh, uh, do you see any challenges of becoming the staff judge advocate for OSI? I asked this question of a lot of folks as far as their challenges when they first come into the organization, and they talk about, understanding the language, the lingo, talking OSI, what they do, what have you. Is that a fair assessment in your case as far as a challenge that you faced as far as just becoming acclimated to the command?
It most certainly is, and there's two parts to that. Yes, it's the lingo, but I think after a certain amount of years in the Air Force, where you talk and breathe alphabet soup, you just
Uh-huh.
adjust on the fly to talking in the different acronyms and figuring them out.
Uh-huh.
Um, Especially if you've done, which I've had the benefit of doing, like joint assignments where if you're rubbing elbows with Army, you're like, I have no idea what they're saying, or you're
Right,
rubbing
right.
elbows with Marines, and you're like, that is a whole
Sure,
different language which you're speaking.
sure.
But after a couple months, you're like, I got it, and you're doing the
Uh-huh.
same thing. You're talking the same language as them. So that's the easy part. I
And I
was
would imagine being in the legal profession that language is a very integral part of what you do.
It most certainly is. And so it's very important to spin yourself up as quickly as possible and hit the ground
Right.
running as quickly as possible.
Uh-huh.
Um, as you said, my background and all the different things that I have been able to do, I've been primarily, to be honest, a litigator. I spent my career doing justice. That's what I did before I came into the JAG Corps.
Hmm.
Uh, that is my passion. It's funny that our oath is to the Constitution, because that document is literally why I became a lawyer, why I
Right.
stay a lawyer, and what I find fun about it. So
Sure.
the fact that that's the only thing that we swear an oath to as military members,
Uh-huh.
and it ain't, it's not a person, it's not an office, it's that document. Is one of the cool things about, again, it keeps it fun, quite frankly.
Right.
But I will
Right.
say that the challenge with OSI is it's the culture. The
Uh-huh.
OSI is also OSI clearly is built up on agents, right? And agents are
Yeah.
agents. And I have, um, again, a cool life and no regrets, and I'm very fortunate. I've been blessed to know and befriend and take my story back actually before baseball even.
Uh-huh.
When I was in college, I was actually recruited by the FBI.
Oh.
And because I was an accounting major, I'm one of those lawyers that actually can do
Uh-huh.
numbers. And
Right.
so
Yeah, okay.
and so
Right.
I was an accounting major, coming out of high school, and that's,
Right.
back then, and probably still, they have they have a need and love for bringing in people with accounting degrees, whether
Right. Right.
CPAs or lawyers.
Uh,
And so and so I've known quite a few, or at least a couple, three agents very well, several obviously throughout my career, and several law enforcement. My best friend on the planet is actually a Baltimore City cop,
Uh-huh.
now retired.
Right.
But the point is, law enforcement think a certain way, they breathe a certain way, they act a certain way. Like I said,
Yeah.
well, I've had the opportunity to rub elbows with and be friends with several in my life, being part of an organization basically exclusively populated by law
Uh-huh.
enforcement
Uh-huh.
or agents. That's the challenge,
Yeah.
because it is, quite frankly, a different mindset, and it's not a negative comment. Quite frankly, if you're in a flying squadron and you're surrounded by pilots and you weren't a pilot, trust and believe, you know
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a different mindset, and you just have to figure your way and figure out how to navigate in that space. So that
Sure.
that is the challenge, on top of, quite frankly, blessed to have been at various bases that had really quality debts throughout my career. And because I
Uh-huh.
was doing law enforcement, or basically litigating, I was working hand in hand with very good debt codes throughout my career,
Right.
and also people that let me look behind the curtain a little bit in
Uh-huh.
OSI as I went. So unlike
Yeah.
many, and
Yeah.
I'm not besmirching anybody, I
Uh-huh.
think many just don't appreciate all the things that OSI does. I think they think of OSI just as law enforcement,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
don't appreciate the other half of the house. And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
and so it's that other half of the house that I actually knew before I got here, uh, that I've enjoyed, and that's the hard part, right? And because becoming part of, the Intel community, in fact, you don't get, that's a buy invite only type of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so until you're in it, it's almost impossible to know it, because
Sure.
it's the Intel community. So being a part of that and spinning myself up on that, that's the biggest challenge, I would say.
Right. Now, given all the folks that you've met, within the command so far, and what have you, and your past association with OSI and law enforcement, um, why do you consider, from your perspective, diversity and inclusion being foundational to the success of OSI? Since this particular podcast deals with, the diversity and inclusion of our command-wide members, as we said in the opening, how important is D&I as you see it from your legal perspective?
It's absolutely not just important to the organizational success of OSI, it's important to the organizational success of the Air Force, and beyond that, the Department of Defense.
Uh-huh.
Um, this isn't a downer moment, it's just a statement of fact. The fact of the matter is, I am one of two uh, Black Colonel Jags in the United States Air Force.
Hmm.
That's a kind of a staggering number when you stop and think about it, especially when you think of the actually sheer number of Jags that there are.
Right.
Um, and I have felt it, one, throughout my career, and I'm using me as an example to illustrate the importance, for not just, like I said, OSI, but the Air Force writ large.
Sure.
Um, is throughout my career, I've had junior officers or out people, not me, come up to me and say the words, you're a unicorn. And I didn't know what it meant.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know what they meant, and I was like,
Right.
I don't get it. And when they explained it, it made sense. You know what I mean? It instantly, I was like, oh, that's what you're saying. Like
Right. Right.
you don't exist. Like I'm, you are basically a mythical creature that no one gets to see. And if you ever get to see one, no one will believe you if you say
Uh-huh.
you saw one.
Right.
And
Right.
so, and as I've made my way up through the ranks, that's what they, that's what, and I get it. I get it now more than ever because now I have brand new JAGs or brand new officers, be they first lieutenants, captains, some, and even majors, wondering, how is it that I got to where I am because there's no one
Yeah.
else like me around me. And so,
Right.
so be it race, be it sex, be it orientation, it doesn't matter.
Uh-huh.
Um, when there is no one like you in positions that matter, it's hard to keep that talent. And I think keeping talent, no matter their origin or their background, is incredibly important to the success of OSI.
Uh-huh.
And that's why, quite frankly, our leader, General Bullard, spent
Right.
a good chunk of his time, away from the command, basically being a part of the Air Force's DNI. Actually, it was, I think it was a cross service, actually DNI.
Right.
Um, I don't know, it was a case study or was a working group.
Hmm.
And put it this way: if your commander, if you're the person at the top of the chain, believes it's a priority to step away from his command to do something, it's got to be a priority for the rest of the command.
Sure. Now, given that, kind of segues into my next question, Colonel. Uh, Putting on your recruiting hat for a little bit, what advice would you give someone who would like to join OSI, given what you just explained about, the command's posture on DNI?
Actually, that makes it a great place to work. Um, Obviously, it can't be dependent on the individual. We can't have General Bullet forever.
Right. Sure.
uh, but the point is, we do. It especially now. It's at a great point in time where there is a focus on diversity and inclusion, and in fact, a leader who is dynamic, who is engaging, and quite frankly, cares about the people.
Hmm.
Because that's what you talk about, someone's life and background and what brings you to where you are. That's what I've learned. I've spent my entire life in and around teams
Right.
and teams, and on the athletic field, you just across the spectrum of things. And teams
Uh-huh.
are that's the best thing about a team. We're in playoff season for my favorite for baseball right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You look at a roster, and there's people from all over the globe contributing to one thing, and everything else goes out the window.
Exactly.
That's that's what OSI is, and more importantly, that's what OSI has to be in order to be successful. To be successful in all of the mission spaces that we have,
Uh-huh.
we have to be diverse. We have to be inclusive, or else we won't be able to operate, especially in the world that we exist in now, and the challenges that we're faced with, in the
Right.
environments that we're forced to work within. So the recruiting pitch would be there is no better place to be. And
Hmm.
if that's you have a passion for the things that fall within the mission set of OSI, there is no other place you'd want to be, because being a part of the Department of Defense, one, but two, this organization and the many things, and several of them are classified, but
Right. Sure.
the cool things, if you get in and you're part of the club, that you'll be allowed to do. Um, you won't have these opportunities in many other organizations, and you won't be given the responsibility as early. That was kind of the draw, even for me in
Hmm.
law, in order to become a JAG. You won't be given the responsibility as early, which means that that you'll grow as fast in any other place. So
Right. Now,
that'd be my pitch.
Colonel, that said, what direction do you envision OSI going into the future? Granted, you only been with the organization a fairly short time, but has that been a good sample size for you to get a handle on to what direction this command is headed?
A little bit, and being the SJA, you are attached, or I am attached directly to the commander.
Right.
That is
Right.
who I am charged with providing advice to on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
And that being the case, I have had the opportunity to sit down with our boss several times, and I think, and this is from a limited sample size, as you said, so
Right.
take that for what it is.
Sure.
Um, I think, as you've seen over the past couple years, we have grown, and we have grown at a time when the rest of the Department of Defense is shrinking. And if
Hmm.
that tells you anything, that tells you that what we do and what we provide to the Department of Defense is extremely important
Yeah.
because dollars dollars are not easy to come by. So when an
Right.
organization is given the extra billets, is given the extra missions, one, it's a great place to be. Two, it's very important to the overarching mission. And three, we're going to keep growing.
Hmm.
That's what I see.
Hmm.
And that presents, quite frankly, challenge to leaders and a challenge to people even at the tactical level because we're going to be in spaces that we haven't been before,
Right.
and
Right.
that's a good thing and a challenge at the same time. So
I see.
that's what I see.
Right. Finally, Colonel, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to say thank you, one, for having me aboard so I could share a little bit of my story and introduce myself to to you and to the command. And more importantly, I want to say thanks to anyone and out there who's listening, especially that's part of the OSI family, because welcome me, excuse me, with open arms. And it's great to be a part of this team. It's great to face the challenges that I've just talked about with such a qualified and energized team. It's a wonderful place to be, quite frankly.
Well said. Our guest has been Colonel Ryan Hendricks, the Staff Judge Advocate for Headquarters OSI. Colonel, thanks again for taking the time to be with us. It was great chatting baseball and OSI with you.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me again.
And thanks to all of you listening for tuning in. For OSI Today, my OSI Journey, I'm Wayne Amon saying so long for now.